Hello, it's Karen Berniston here with my monthly designer challenge video. This month we have a theme of Ink It, and so I decided for my double spinner tag card that I would create the background of my card using Distress Oxide ink. So I will show that first on the video, but the main technique I'm teaching is how to double the spinner square inside a card so that you can get this really cool double spinning action. For decorator dies, I'll use the Wine Charms and a leaf from the Autumn Elements, and you can check out all of our die designs at karenberniston.com. And of course you can swap out your decorator dies and then you have a whole different theme to the card. So here's the same card, this time done in a holiday theme, and for this one, instead of using the Wine Charms, I swapped out and used some flowers. So to do this technique, you're going to need the spinner square pop-up die set. But the other dies are very optional. So I'm doing a wine-themed card. I've used the Wine Charms. I've used a leaf from the Autumn Elements. Maybe you're making this in a completely different theme. You also have an option when it comes to the card itself. I wanted to show this being done using the tag from the tag book die set, which is a 3x6 tag. I've cut 2 tags and a hinge. If you do not already own the tag book and it's not on your wish list, you can still make this card. Just make your own card that's a similar size. So I went with a 3" by 12" piece of cardstock, scored it in the middle for folding. And then if you would like to mimic the look of a tag-shaped card, you can do that using the largest square die from the spinner square set. So you'd slide the end of your card into that die so that the die is on a diagonal, and then you run that through. And then what'll happen is it'll cut those ends and it'll give you the look of tags for a card. Since this is the Ink It challenge, I will start with inking my backgrounds. Distress Oxide inks make beautiful backgrounds, and I'm using just 2 colors here, Peeled Paint and Vintage Photo. And I'm pressing those inks onto my non-stick craft sheet and then spritzing them with water until the ink beads up. Now you can either dredge the tags through the ink or you can do more of just a drop and pounce. So I'm just doing the drop and pounce with a little rotate in between. And just like that, I've actually made a background I'm very pleased with. So what's cool about the Distress Oxide inks is that you can go back through and do additional layers. You can spritz the tag with water as you go, but I kind of hit the jackpot here. I like this background just with one pass. So I'm going to call that first tag good and just repeat it. So I'm going to try and do the same thing and see if I can get something similar. Again, what I love about the Distress Oxide inks is you don't always know what you're going to get until you pick that tag up and turn it over. But I'm going to try and just do the same thing. So pounce once, rotate, pounce again, see what I get. Brilliant. So just a little bit more pouncing to try and fill in some of the white spots, and then I just need to dry my tag with my heat tool. And then I just used my leftover ink to add a little bit to the hinge piece. Now that hinge piece will be mostly covered. It's really only the area between the 2 folds that will show in the finished card. So I didn't have to spend a lot of time making sure that it was all covered, just mainly that area between the folds. I want to use a strong adhesive to attach these 3 pieces together. I will use my LINECO neutral pH adhesive put in my fine tip bottle. We do sell both of those items on our website. You could equally use a very strong red liner tacky tape. Now to finish out my background, I want to add some leaves and some grapes. So I've got a very lightweight white cardstock, it's only about 60-pound cardstock, on some score tape so that everything I cut from this white cardstock will become a sticker. Now the leaf I've chosen from the Autumn Elements is the maple leaf, just because the shape of it was probably about the closest to what you would see in a grapevine. I cut a total of 6 of those leaves, and since they are all stickers, it's pretty easy to arrange them and stick them down onto my tag background. I just made sure that I did an arrangement where the stems of the leaves would connect up somehow to the next one so that it would look like a vine. Now one thing I like to do is to store my blending foams underneath each of my Distress Oxide inks in a little cardstock tray that I have created to fit those blending foams. If you would like to make your own little trays for your Distress Oxide blending foams, there is a video that shows you how to do that, as well as a free SVG or PDF file on my blog. So I'll definitely link that at the end of this video. So since it was the Ink It challenge, I did want to spend a little time in the video showing those inking techniques, but honestly, we have a whole pop-up card to make here. So I'm just going to blaze through a little bit of what I did to finish out the background, which was basically to cut some grapes from the leftover white sticky cardstock, color them with Distress ink, and then add them to the background. Okay, the next section is cutting the window. Okay, I'm using the scalloped square die from the spinner square pop-up, and I'm placing that edge of the die about an inch off of that center fold. So just with my ruler, checking that it's about an inch. I've got some temporary tape holding that down for die cutting. Now, I've gone higher than center, and that's because I'm planning to have my scene on my upper spinner that shows up in that window. So then, of course, I want to be a little bit higher than center on the location for that window. So when I was cutting just little small pieces, I was using my Sizzix Sidekick, but now that I need to get that tag book cut, I've switched up to my Big Shot. So you can use any die cutting machine that can accommodate a wafer thin die. Okay, setting my card aside, I'm going to grab the spinner square die. Okay, this next section is folding and installing these spinners. If you are brand new to the spinner square pop-up die, please do this. Go to KarenBerniston.com, put spinner in the search box. That's going to bring up the product page. You will find 2 in-depth assembly videos on that page. So if you find that watching me assemble the spinners here on this video just goes a little fast for you, that's fine. Just go watch those more in-depth videos. Everything goes much slower and I really explain every step that I'm doing here. But for those of you who are experienced spinner square users, you're going to recognize what I'm doing here, just usual assembly on the spinner square. So after working those folds, the diagonals and the vertical fold that are underneath the square itself, I add adhesive to the X triangle and I fold on the perforation line so the square comes over the top and into that adhesive. And while I have my thumb in that triangle holding it while the adhesive sets, I might as well just go ahead and start getting my square to spin. And to do that, I need to collapse those 2 triangles into the piece. They'll take that square on a little ride as they go. So the square will spin as the piece opens. From here, it's pretty easy assembly. You're just going to find the score lines next to the X's. There's 4 of them, and all 4 of them will be mountain folds, which means you fold away from yourself. Then there's 1 mountain fold just floating out there in the middle of the piece. You will see it on your own piece because the die will have scored it. And then 1 valley fold, which is the short one. And that's the little valley fold that brings that upper platform kind of up and over. You can see this is your position that it'll be when the card is open. Okay, let's find the flat position that will be used to install it in the card. So the first thing I need to do is engage that little zigzag fold in the middle. So that little valley and mountain, by having both of those folded, what it'll do is it'll bring the ends of the 2 outer X panels so that they're next to each other. And then over here, I want to go ahead and spin the square so that that other X panel is tucked underneath the piece. So this is the closed position. So normally you would just add your adhesive to the X panels and close against them. Now this time I'm trying to cram 2 spinners into this card. So after adding my adhesive to my X panels, rather than leave them on the right side of the card and close against them, I'm actually going to flip them over and attach them myself to the left side of the fold. So flipping this piece over, making sure those 2 X panels are right next to each other. The ends should go right into the fold of the card. Now, since I'm doing a tag book, I have a little bit of a wide fold, so I'm just choosing basically the center. So I'm just making sure that the ends of the panels are right in the center gap of my fold. And I do not worry at all that I have a little piece sticking out. I'll just take my scissors and remove that. Now, if I were doing a single spinner, I would add adhesive to the 2 X's and close the card, but I'm going to add a second spinner, so I need to work on that first. Now for my second spinner, I'm going to make some modifications. And the first thing I'm going to do is remove the upper platform. So I find that little short fold. Normally it's a valley, but in this case it doesn't matter because I'm actually going to remove that whole side of the platform. So right on that fold line, I'm cutting to remove the upper platform, and then I'm going to keep on cutting so that the lower platform comes off as well. So this is the one here that would be your lower X panel. I forgot to put the X's on. Well, actually, let me just add the X. Okay, so this would be your normal X panel, the lower one. And then let's go add our other X's. So in this case, we're only going to end up with 3 X's instead of 5 because we've removed the upper platform completely and we don't need it. Okay, now the reason I cut that piece off is so that I could move it. So what I'm going to do is just find the fold line and then go in and glue that back onto the spinner square mechanism, but just up there in that upper corner that I've created by removing the upper platform. So adhesive all over the panel, the back of the panel that does not have the X, use the score line and the upper edge as a guide so that I can get it nice and straight, and then reattach it to the pop-up so that it is now my new X panel on the left, and it's much closer to the spinning square than it used to be. Okay, this next step is only because I am trying to put these spinners very close to each other to be able to get them in a 3-inch tall card. So if you had a taller card, you probably wouldn't need to do it, but for my card today, I need to actually remove some of that excess cardstock. From here, we just have usual assembly. So that means you fold the vertical, then the diagonal, open it back up, adhesive on the X triangle, fold the square over and onto the X triangle, and then while you're waiting for it to set up, just go ahead and spin it. So just usual spinner square assembly. And the fold next to the X panel will be a mountain as usual, so I'll just go in and work that fold. And now what I have is just like a mini spinner. So it's got my 2 X panels. The one on the left is the one that's going to glue to the card first. I'm going to flip it over now and install that next to my first spinner. And I'm going to come up enough until in the closed position, the 2 squares, the spinning squares that are out on the left, are not overlapping. And then once I have that location established, it's just a matter of adding my adhesive to my X panel and then going in and also attaching that against the fold and just making sure everything's straight before my glue sets up. Okay, so left side of the card, everything is attached. And now what I need to do is add adhesive to the 3 exposed X panels, and those are what attaches to the right side of the card. So just adding my glue to my X panels, and then what I want to do is hold everything nice and flat as I can keep it, while I carefully close the right side of the card. And if you're using glue, I definitely suggest being patient on this. That first time you open the card, you'll want to go very slowly, so in case those tabs pop up, that you can just go back in and squish them flat again and make sure that they're attached. As you open the card, the 2 squares will spin. You've got 3 tabs that have been attached, and if you open the card all the way up to flat, you should be able to go in there and press against those 3 tabs as necessary to make sure that you have a really good connection. And then here's what happens. As you open the card, your 2 squares will spin. Next up is decorating the spinners. I'm using the Wine Charms die set. They do have their own video if you need it. And what I'm doing first is borrowing an idea from Kelly Booth, where she stamped the wine labels themselves using a script stamp. So I just found a big one in my stash and stamped that. And then on the bottle itself, I've just used a little distress ink around the edges. I'm going to remove the hole at the top since I'm not using these bottles as charms today, and then just add my stamped label to it. And I'm going to repeat that process a few times for some more bottles for my card. Okay, to make the pouring wine bottle, I'll do that in the closed position, and I'll just add my glue to that upper spinner by putting the glue down through the window in a vertical line, pretty much in the center of the square. And then I can go in there with my wine bottle and make sure that it's nice and straight when the card is closed, and then as it opens, it will tilt and pour. Okay, there's a little bit of excess square to the right side of my bottle, and I'm going to take my scissors and carefully go in, leaving a little bit of a shadow, and trim some of that square away so that it's more in the line of the wine bottle itself. I would not recommend trimming any more of the square. You do need some of it for the structure and the function of the piece, so instead I'll just disguise the rest of the square by adding some grapes. Since this is a window card, I do have to think about how things look when the card is closed, as well as how they look when it's open, so I can work through the window to add another wine bottle there on that upper platform. So it makes a nice little scene in the closed position, and then when it opens, that other wine bottle also pops up. And I'm going to use some leaves in my sculpture as well, and for anything that crosses a fold, I'll actually cut it on the fold, and that way I don't have to worry about adding more tension in the fold. So in this case, I just cut that leaf in half. For my other spinner, I'm going to add the rectangle. So that rectangle die comes in the set. It is sized to perfectly fit on the spinner square. You just need your adhesive, kind of like an L. You just don't want it in the quadrant that's collapsing down into the triangles, but the other 3 are fine. And then that rectangle just lines up with the edges. And then as you close the card, it'll spin that rectangle now back up to a vertical. And then I just decorated that rectangle. So more leaves, grapes, and my wine glass. And I took a black colored pencil just around some of the edges of my background leaves as well to make them stand out a little bit more. Okay, it's the last section, finishing the card. Holding a cardstock tag to the front of the card in the right position using temporary tape while I trace through the window. Then I can remove that tag from the front of the card, and I'll just use my scissors to rough cut that window. So that just means to go in and cut outside of the white lines by a little bit. I'm going to be framing this window, so it doesn't matter that these lines are straight or perfect, they'll be fine. Then when I go to add that tag to the front of the card, the first thing I want to place is a little transparency over the window opening. And that way when I add my tag, that transparency will be sandwiched between the two layers. And it doesn't matter that it's a rough opening because again, I'm going to add a frame around that window. And then for the back of the card, just a solid tag. The window frames are made by nesting 2 dies together from the spinner square set, the scalloped square for the inside, and then the slightly larger square for the outside. To give the illusion that wine is actually pouring from the bottle, I cut the wine again using sticky cardstock so that I could actually attach some embroidery floss behind that piece as I added it to the glass. And then I can't just go straight up to the end of the wine bottle because I need slack. As this thing closes, those two pieces get further apart. So I really need to go in and do this in the closed position to determine how much slack I need to give to that twine. So I've figured out where the dot of glue needs to go, just about right here. Then I can add that glue, trim off the excess, and then go in and press it to the end of the bottle. So just a fun idea to give the illusion that wine is actually pouring out of the bottle and into the glass. For a greeting, I have this wonderful stamp from Funny Bones Riley & Company. It says, "This wine is making me awesome." Fits perfectly on that rectangle die, and I decided to actually put it at an angle so that it would match a little bit of the angle of the rectangle on the right side. A couple more wine charms, some hole protectors, and twine, and my card is done. A tag book card measures 3 by 6 in the closed position, so it fits nicely in an A7 envelope for mailing. So here's that holiday version of this card, this time using pattern papers instead of ink techniques. And then instead of using the wine charms, I used the flowers from the Flowers and Bee set, trimming the ends to be points so that it would give a feel of a poinsettia. Obviously not perfect, but kind of with that feel. That same maple leaf is actually trimmed to be those holly leaves, so you really can get a lot of use out of that maple leaf from the autumn elements. Okay, everything you need is in the description box, including a link to the blog post where you'll find all of the team's cards as well. Thanks for watching. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBurniston.com where you can find out information about purchasing these dies as well as links to all my other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.